Hello, AV Tweeps and AV Tweeps adjacent. Welcome to brAVe Space, or in this case, brAVe Skills. brAVe Skills is a practical offshoot of the brAVe Space podcast, where we explore some of the topics most impactful for the world of business, corporate culture, and leadership. I'm Britt.
And I'm Leon. And like we said, we want to focus on skills with this show, so we're hoping that something from this is something that you'll find helpful, or maybe by extension, someone that you know will find helpful.
Before we get started here, we do have two disclaimers for you. The first is that opinions expressed in this podcast are our own and not necessarily representative of our respective institutions, companies, or sponsors of the show. The second is that we appreciate listeners' grace and understanding as we tackle topics we're not necessarily experts in.
Oh, right. Now, on to the episode. That's all I had to say, just the one line.
It's good.
So, Britt, you're not usually the person that's being asked questions on this show. It's normally the other way around. But you were talking about what you thought this episode should be about, and sort of something that was really pressing for you in your mind, and that was the idea of dispelling negativity or leading from a place of joy. And I'd love for you to go ahead and start and just say, why is it that that's something that you thought we should talk about?
Yeah, so there have been a couple of things that I've encountered recently that really put joy on my mind. The first is the sequel to Inside Out 2. I love both of these movies. I think that they are such a smart, fun way to explore and explain what emotions can do to a person as they're experiencing the world and how emotions can color your experiences of the world. And one thing that you see in both movies is how joy and sadness go hand in hand. They're very much partners. And I think that is very representative of how real emotions work inside of us. It's the recognition that you cannot truly have joy if you don't also experience the flip side and you know what it feels like to have sadness and those other emotions that they showcase, like anxiety and fear and anger. Like they really all mold together. But I love joy so much and the idea of leading with joy, because I think that we need to recognize joy as not a fleeting emotion. Like there's a reason it's joy and not happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Joy is something that can be cultivated and become a part of you naturally. And it's how you can really approach the world and approach others. And the other thing I encountered was in the podcast, The 3-Minute Reset. And in that, I had heard them say that joy is the ultimate competitive advantage. So we not only now are getting these messages from the movies of joy is a complex emotion that you experience with other emotions, but it's also now something that actually gives you an advantage. It's not a like laissez-faire toxic positivity thing, but it's a genuine, this can get you ahead of the game in some way. And so that's kind of where my mind was at.
Yeah. One of the things that's really funny to me is there's actually a business that I think of, and this is affiliated with AV podcast. Normally, we try not to name companies, but this is not an AV company, so I don't have a problem with that. And it's actually Chick-fil-A. When you're talking about a competitive advantage, I can think through 1,000 times that someone wanted to go out for fast food, and we could have gone anywhere, and we drove further to go to a Chick-fil-A because everyone felt so good about the fact that the people that work there seemed to be pleased to be there. And there didn't seem to be not I'm sure not everyone had a great day all the time, but you didn't feel like you were in a place that was steeped in the doldrums, or steeped in some kind of negativity. And I would like to assume that the leadership of the company or the franchises had something to do with that. And I think that's the same thing of other businesses that you might frequent. Is I 100% agree. I love that you just said that it's a competitive advantage when we think about business and we think about things we lead teams to do. You know, we're a capitalist society. There's sometimes a little bit of a, got to eat what you kill kind of thing that goes on. And being competitive is something that we do think about, but that's not necessarily a negative thing. And in fact, the idea of positivity being something that helps with that competitive advantage, I think is great because honestly, if someone then wants to win you out or sorry, beat you out in some kind of competition and they realize that what you've got is positivity going on, now they have to up their game on doing the
Mhm.
same. And so really sometimes by being competitively joyful, I think you're probably contributing to a larger sort of environment, I think, even outside of your own
Mhm.
business. So um now I haven't seen Inside Out 2 yet, but I need to. I will apologize. Probably should have watched it, and I feel like that would have been good research for before.
I mean, I love
For
that that could have
before.
been readers for you. I highly recommend it. But I like that you brought up the concept of these companies that people are attracted to because when they walk in, they're greeted in a certain way. They have certain expectations that are met every time because of the culture of that company. And what's really
Mhm,
rooted in the culture of that company is this concept of joy. And like you said, not everyone is going to have a good day, and we're our own human selves when we show up to work, and our own human selves are not always having a good day even outside of
mhm,
what's happening in the work environment. So I think that's why it's so pivotal to create this culture of a, almost a joyous expectation, like this is
mhm.
how we're going to approach others. What I would wonder, and we already said we're not experts, we're just spitballing, how do you get your people to that place of joy in a way that it doesn't feel like it's actually just toxic positivity?
That is a great question. From my perspective, I've got examples here, but in a previous life, I was a tech manager and an integrator, and I worked on with an in-house technician team, and we did a lot of live events, as a lot of us in AV do. And we did come across um, we came across the challenge of our clients sometimes exuding negativity because when you're helping a client in a live event, they're super nervous sometimes. Even those that say that they're not, they're super nervous. And
Mhm.
sometimes when one thing starts to go a little bit wrong, that kind of snowballs and that impacts everybody involved, not just the technicians. So we a lot of the events that we did were weddings, for example, and things like that. Things that are supposed to be happy occasions, but you'd be surprised how quickly someone can forget what the occasion is and then
Mhm.
be kind of steeped in some negativity. What we did on that particular team is we decided to recognize that we needed to have a decision to have more of a positive outlook, but also demeanor
Mhm.
before we ever met the client. Because we realized that your behavior can affect others, as in the example that I just said. And we had an opportunity while the clients weren't people that they weren't on our team necessarily. They weren't employed by us or anything like that. We couldn't make them do anything if we wanted to. We could still influence. Um, you mentioned the idea of joy not being a fleeting thing. That's 100% the same thought that I have about it. Joy is not something that happens to you. It's something that it's a conscious thing to put on, honestly.
Mhm.
It's kind of funny if you look at like the what's the word? Etymology. That's the word for
Mhm.
where words come from, I think.
Yep.
There's a word for where words come from. I wonder where that word comes from. When you look at the etymology of joy, it there's a couple things that you see. You see calm delight, which is
Mm.
interesting, which is
Mhm.
to say it's not a wavering kind of thing. It's a conscious thing. Again, it's not something that happens to you like
Mhm.
some other feelings might. It's related to an action. It's also stems from the word rejoice. That's something you do, right? It's not something
Mm.
that is done to you. You can rejoice with somebody, but you're still doing it.
Mhm.
But when you talk about the idea of toxic positivity and people being afraid, if people were afraid to do this thing that we're recommending here because they're afraid of appearing unrealistic or toxically positive, I would say don't look at it that way. Recognize and talk with your teams about the fact that there is a difference between toxic positivity and operating from joy.
Mhm.
Um, Perfection's not the aim. Perfection's not the aim, and appearing like everything's great isn't the aim. No one
Mhm.
really expects you to be dishonest, you know? No one's expecting you to act like something that's not true, but again, if you have the commitment to do that ahead of time, that's a little bit different. I choose to go to work today, and then the whole day I show up. It's that kind of
Mhm.
thing. It's not a one-time decision. It's kind of a daily, like, moment by moment commitment. But it's really important, I think, that you do it, or you commit to do it before you're faced with something that wants to kind of rob you of joy or rob your team of joy. Because joy, it doesn't get up in arms when something goes wrong. It pulls up the bootstraps and presses on in the face of some adversity, right? So
Right.
a lot of us in AV, we're very used to the idea of challenges that just come up that you're not expecting to find. Live events are a thing. Live is live.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, it only happens once.
it only happens once, right? And
Yeah.
so I think even that perspective is good to know too. It only happens once, but it also kind of means a thing that went wrong also only happened once, and then you move on with your life.
Mhm.
But I think I would add one more comment here. I'm curious how you feel about this. Sometimes I think of metaphors. I don't know if
Mhm.
this metaphor works because I actually can't seem to grow anything in my house. We try to grow plants and they always die. But I feel like negativity is like a weed.
Yes.
So it's something that we need to be diligent about not choking our teams or choking
Mhm.
our cultures. So if I could be a little bit cornball, I guess. A team is kind of like it's like a garden. It's like a garden. It's like a
Mhm.
plant. It needs nurturing. It needs care. They don't just grow on their own. We all have to do something to try to keep them going. And I can tell you, it's not always easy, at least with plants. Um, I someone's got to help me. Someone's
I
got to help
I
me with that.
completely agree with you. Yes, and I think that is such an important piece of culture building. And for those who are listening who might feel like, well, I'm kind of lower on the ladder and I'm not the person who builds culture. I think it's important for you to
Yeah.
recognize that that's not true. I think that everyone who contributes to the team contributes to culture. And regardless of what's coming from top down, you can always lead from where you're seated, and you can show up as your best self and encourage those around you to do that as well. Positivity as a wavelength travels faster and stronger than negativity does if we all allow ourselves to lean into it. And again, that's not meant to be a like toxic positive show up and be happy every day. That's unrealistic, and not to continuously quote a children's movie, but if we look to Inside Out, great example, like joy and sadness, its characters literally hold hands, like they are together, and that's okay. I think what's so important is to recognize that, to give each other grace, to recognize if someone is not having a good day or just having a rough go of it, and to help them navigate that in the best boundary set way that you can. That's a whole other conversation. But I totally agree that when you see a negative personality, or you can't steep in negativity all the time. You can't allow your
Mhm.
team to do that. It's so toxic in and of itself. It brings everybody down, and like a weed. It chokes out the team.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm surprised that the analogy works because I really feel like I don't know anything about plants, but I think it does. If you're watering a plant, you're watering it with good water, right? But if
Hmm.
you're watering a plant with bad water, horrible chemically filled water or something. I don't know. If you're giving it something it doesn't need, it's not going to grow the way you want it to. It'll grow in
Hmm.
some direction maybe, but it may not grow the way you want it to. So I think also I think practically thinking about how we talk is something too. It's
Hmm.
not just like how we act, but how
Yeah.
we speak, right? If vomit is coming out of your mouth, and we know what I mean, right? If you're just doing word vomit all the time, that's not going to beget what you want, right? You kind of
Hmm.
reap what you sow. And so if you're putting out joy, you should be expecting that you can get that back. You mentioned the idea of an expectation. I think that's totally, totally true. And I think that's beyond just teams, though. Um, I think that's also clients,
Hmm.
customers, people, as those folks as well. like you said, it travels farther. It travels farther. I think someone had once said something about how it takes fewer muscles in the face to smile and way more of them to frown.
Mhm.
It in some ways you could say that it's easier. I don't really want to say it's easier, but it's certainly like anything that you practice, it becomes easier, which is why I think it's important to just kind of commit to try it. But like you said, we don't need to act as though we're happy all the time.
Right.
It's not about whether you're happy all the time. It's just putting forward what is useful for the people that you're trying to serve, the people that are going along with you. Um, and another thing that comes to mind is the idea that if your culture is one that doesn't value this kind of thing, with that competitive advantage thought you had, it might be something that also kills your competitive advantage. It might
Mhm.
kill your productivity. It might kill forward momentum. I had a leader, actually a president of a company, who loved Peter Drucker, and he had one quote from the author Peter Drucker that he always said, and it was that culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Mm.
And really, what that means to me is that all the best laid plans in the world don't really amount to anything, or will always have a challenge, I should say, if those responsible, big L, little l leader, right? No matter what
Mhm.
level you're at, if those that are responsible for carrying out the plan aren't sporting a positive, good expectation kind of outlook, um, people want to work with positive people, and I think that's people who you pay and people who pay you. I know that might sound strange in a day where we have culture wars that seem to be fought all the time, but I think it really is true. And I don't know how many people it takes to destroy a garden necessarily,
Mhm.
or to tear down culture, but I'd rather not find out through experience. So I think that idea of thinking about whatever level I'm at contributes. Let me just be responsible for what I'm doing, and try to carry this forward, and realize that it is still okay to not be okay, but that doesn't
Yes.
mean it has to destroy my outlook or my company's
Yeah.
outlook.
Absolutely. And one thing you had mentioned was just language itself. And I think that the language that we use has a lot to do with ways that we can shift our mindset. So, like when I get up in the morning, I don't tell myself I have to go to work, I get to go to work. Going
Mm,
to work is a privilege that I have and that I'm excited to have. The work that I do is a privilege to do. I get to go to a higher education environment and I get to make the AV the best it can be in our academic spaces so that students from all walks of life can receive an excellent education, right? Like,
yeah.
that's how is that not quite possibly the coolest job in the world? And
Mhm,
yeah, there are bad days. I get frustrated. I have cut myself on not flushed zip ties. You know what I mean? Like
mhm,
some days you just want to like scream at the sun over a zip tie that wasn't cut correctly. But I kind of take a step back in those moments and ground myself and shift the thinking. And that's a really active practice. It's a practice of gratitude. And I think that is ultimately that what is the difference between happiness and joy? Well, I'm not happy that my arm is bleeding right now, but I can still, feel joy about the work that I'm doing because I have this big end goal in mind. And I think that's a part of it too. All of that like mindset shifting is also keep the end goal in mind and recognize your little wins along the way. And it might be a really little win that day. It might be as simple as I did, in fact, show up at work today. Maybe that was your
mhm.
win for the day, but it's still taking you and your team toward a goal.
Yeah, absolutely. There are, I think if you are a big L leader or even a little L leader, you get the opportunity to be that person that helps bring someone up. I know a lot of
Mhm.
people struggle with that same concept of, oh, I just had a bad day. Oh, everything is, my whole week is ruined, or I didn't do something the way I wanted to. I didn't achieve what I wanted to. But honestly, the fact that you showed up, like, that still means something. That should still mean something.
Yeah.
and it should at least mean something to you. It should
Yeah.
definitely mean something to you, and we can applaud applaud folks for that. Um, I think it's funny. The Olympics are on right now. This will be a little bit of a time capsule for the episode, but during this time right now, the Olympics are on, and there are athletes that have worked their butts off for years to compete for 20 seconds in some cases, like putting everything on the line there. And I'm sure they're not happy when they don't win necessarily, but I think there's also this idea of like, yeah, I got here though. I got to do this. I got to
Mhm.
do this. I got to be on this world stage for 20 seconds and run, and I might have tripped, but I still got to be here. Not
Mhm.
everybody got to be here. So yeah,
Yes.
I love that
Yes.
you said that. I get to do this today. It's great.
Mhm.
Well, we also have another segment of our show that we like to do, where we actually go through some questions that we've heard from the community. And I think we've got a little bit of time. This would be a good
Yeah.
time to kind of transition to that.
Let's
So
do it.
so listeners out there, if you haven't heard already, we have a form where you can submit ideas to us, but we also follow things on social that you also are submitting to us personally as well, beyond just maybe submitting directly to the show. And we actually had something that came up through a digital community called the Avixa Exchange that you might have heard of. And I'll kind of paraphrase it here. The question actually had to do with strategic planning in AV, and I feel it's like it's kind of related to this topic here of being able to dispel negativity. The question was, what are some common objections that you see to an AV strategic plan, and how do you counter them, or how would you counter them?
Yeah. So for me, I think the most common objections have to do with cost or timeline. And I like to always, like I said before, frame things as what is the end goal. And we're going to begin this process with the goal in mind. And we never want that to be lost. I think it's very easy when you look at technology to get caught in, ooh, shiny.
Mm,
And we don't want to pursue, ooh, shiny. We want to pursue meeting a specific need. And so if you can approach that conversation as this particular hardware, this software, this integrator, this timeline is what meets this need, that, and you can explain that, that tends to, for in my experience, dispel the arguments that might pop up when you're in that process.
yeah, I have very similar um, experience and thought on this as well. That when someone, I think it's going to matter for this particular submitter where the negativity might be coming from, because they might have a
Mhm.
different kind of approach here. If the negativity has something to do with if it comes from outside of the AV realm, it could very well be that people don't understand why we're trying to have some kind of AV strategic plan. I think we all know that sometimes AV can be a little bit, further down the totem pole when it comes to strategic things in a business, depending on where you're at. And when someone just doesn't understand, I think instead of looking at it as negativity, look at it as kind of an opportunity to explain something. Find out, like you're saying, the need. Sometimes
Mhm.
the need is someone needs comfort. Someone needs to be able to feel comfort with what it is you're proposing because they need to understand what the outcome is. And if you've already figured out or recognized what the need for the plan is,
Mhm.
I think this is probably the time where instead of hunkering down and saying, "Man, they just don't get it. I don't know why they don't get it." You had that thought, "I don't know why they don't get it." Let's find out why they didn't get it. Let's find out and let's try to do something about that. Um, I've said to a supervisor before that something I find happens a lot is people are trying to do the same thing and they're just talking about it in two different ways, and so they don't understand each other.
Mhm.
But I do hope that this particular listener is actually able to be successful with this. But I don't want to say there's a one size fits all solution here, but that's what I found in the past is objections from outside of AV usually stem from not really understanding what you're looking at when you see a lot of dollar signs.
Mhm.
You see long timelines. Um, you see technology terms that don't make sense to you, or do because of the democratization of technology, essentially. We've all got cameras and mics and things in our houses that we wouldn't have had before because we all do video chats and stuff. And so there might be a little bit of a couldn't you just syndrome going on as well. But I think you have an opportunity to educate when that's coming up.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think it's also important to one, ask more questions than you make statements. So
Mhm.
go into this conversation prepared to just with a lot of inquiry and a lot of curiosity, because that's going to help you communicate with that person better. Never make an assumption about what they're thinking or how they're feeling, but just have a curious mindset in order to
Mhm.
communicate with them. And I like what you said too about, they could be feeling their own anxiety, their own fear, their own anxiousness. And if you approach someone in that way, if you recognize they're feeling a negative emotion right now, they might be feeling scared. I think that helps you to extend a little bit of grace to that someone instead of seeing them as someone who's getting in your way and giving you a hard
Mhm.
time because you're trying to get something
Mhm.
done. And the last thought that keeps fleeting in and out of my brain, so hopefully it comes back. Okay, we've got questions, we've got grace. You can do it, brain. It's
You
gone,
can
and
do
it'll
it.
come back as soon as you start talking.
Well, if you're listening right now, you should be wishing that Britt can get it. This is recorded, so someone's going to actually do that.
Yeah,
They're going to
right.
go, "She can do it. She can do it," and then maybe be
I
amazed when it
believe
suddenly
in
comes
her.
to you. Like,
Yeah,
I
it'll
did
come
that.
to me at like 1 a.m. But yeah, let's see. Good thing you're gonna edit this. Thanks for
Hmm.
volunteering to do that.
Hmm.
Um,
Not this part
let's
though.
see. Not this part, no. We're just gonna watch me struggle. I think it's gone, but I feel like I gave you some good thoughts anyway.
3 hours later.
I just thought of the third thing. It just came back.
Okay, well here we go.
I don't know how you're gonna edit this, God bless. Alright, so the third thing, and it's such an obvious thing, so I don't know how it kept fleeting in and out of my brain, is to not speak in technical terms. So,
Mm,
to prepare for that conversation in a way that is very human, at the end of the day, the people you're presenting this plan to don't care what the box is called or even so much what the box does. They want to understand how that box is going to contribute to the end goal, to their experience. So just keep it very user friendly in the way you describe the system. And it really depends on the person themselves. Some people like for you to go a little bit more into the weeds and they would like to know why you need so many boxes and how they're communicating. And some people just want to hear, oh, okay, you're doing all of this because it meets this goal that I understand. And knowing which type of person they are is going to go back to your curiosity and asking them questions.
yeah,
There it
and
is.
no, that was work. See, it's gonna be smooth. The listener, they know that you did that right away the first time with no with no issues. But with that, I think that's great practical advice. Having this kind of in your tool belt already, so you're ready for that kind of opposition, would be, I think, great. Well, I think with that, we could probably go ahead and close, maybe.
Yeah, let's do it. So, after having this conversation, we do have some action items for you, as is the Brave Space way. So, our first action item is to try to begin a day or an endeavor with a determination to maintain a positive atmosphere and outlook before setbacks hit you.
Another potential action item that you could take into account here is to try to think through the things that could go wrong in a situation before they go wrong. So you and your team can spend some time writing those things down and then take a moment to try to figure out what would we do if these things came up. So then you're not overwhelmed by them when they do show up.
Those are all great ways for us to move forward together. We hope that this episode gave you something new to think about in your professional and personal journey. and maybe even expanded your perspective on your own experiences. If you have any topics that you would like to discuss on the show, you can let us know on X, LinkedIn, Avixa Exchange. If you Google us, you'll find us and you can message us there. If you like this show, please let us and the world know by giving as many stars as you can imagine on your podcast player of choice. And for easy updates, be sure to subscribe to brAVe Space.
All the stars.
All the stars.
All of them.
Leave a review.
I don't know how to make. I'm trying to make the funny thing pop up. Here we go. Give us all the stars. You're supposed to be able to make fireworks, and I can't figure out how it happens. It just happens. One day it's going to happen in one of our episodes, and we're just going to have to deal with it.
That would be incredible. Yes, and it
happens
goes right into the
randomly.
blooper reel.
Yeah, it happens randomly, and I'm always sitting here like, how did I do it? I don't know. Yeah. It happened in a relatively serious conversation earlier today, and it was pretty disarming. It was pretty good timing, actually. I was making a point that someone could have felt bad about. They didn't feel bad.
Thanks, AI reactions.